So introducing myself for those who are watching the recording. Jason's my name. I am the founder of the Primal Man Project, and tonight we are doing a masterclass titled The Simple Path to Peak Performance. We're going to do a little bit of interactivity tonight to keep it interesting for everybody here on Zoom. And for those watching the recording, thank you for joining us. Great to have you with us. Let me give you a quick visual of what we're going to be doing tonight and talk through this agenda. The masterclass titled A Simple Path to Peak Performance. Here's my promises to you tonight. We are going to be exploring the 3 most powerful ways to hack your neurochemistry to double your productivity. And we're going to be understanding that inside of this idea of basically what is motivation. What are the 3 core elements inside motivation? We're going to unpack each of them in turn. We're then going to be understanding and diving into the 5 most powerful behavioral drivers to learn faster, improve your focus, and to be happier. So neuroscientists, behavioral psychologists have identified the 5 key elements needed to drive ourselves through motivation. The final piece we're going to be doing that's going to be necessary for us to unpack each of these individual elements is understanding your biology. So how to harness your biology to create a more fulfilling life. And what that is going to be about tonight is around neurochemistry. So we are going to be doing a neurochemistry 101 so that we can understand these other pieces around motivation and drive. So this masterclass is for you if you want to get more out of your life and what you're performing, how you're performing now, you want to improve it. This is for you if you are wanting to achieve peak performance and optimize your results. This is not for you if you have no interest in working on yourself. The information I'm going to give you over the next 90 minutes is of no use to you if you don't do anything about it. This also isn't for you if you're not willing to take action or implement things that you're learning. So again, if this is something that you watch and it's another video from your YouTube that you do nothing with, you can probably dial off now. This is about achieving peak performance. It is based on the science behind a book called The Art of Impossible. The author, Stephen Kotler, has spent 20 years diving into this, and he's studied CEOs, professional athletes, extreme sport athletes, people who achieve world records and who do things that seem to be impossible. So if this is not the area that you're interested in diving into, you can dial off now, but it is for you if you want to achieve better results in your life. So we're gonna jump right in because we've got a lot to get through, and I want to give you guys maximum value possible. So if you've got anything else going on right now, I invite you to turn it off, turn the distractions off, turn the notifications off so you can be fully present. And during the program, during the masterclass, we will have time for you to interact, ask questions. I'll be asking questions of you in the chat where you can drop in and interact. So we're going to have an interactive session, and it's going to be adding a lot of value. So why do we need to study peak performance? Like, why would human beings need to bother understanding how to reach our full potential? And there's a Harvard psychologist from the 1800s, right? So we're talking, this problem has been around for a long time. Now read this out. A human individual lies usually far within its limits. He possesses powers of various sorts he habitually fails to use, energizes well below his maximum. He behaves well below his optimum in coordination, in power of inhibition, and in control. In every conceivable way, it is only the long-established habit of inferiority to our full self that is bad. So basically, what are we trying to say here? It is that human beings, we seem to be one of these, like a very unique animal. In every other animal in the animal kingdom, they do what they need to do and they get their shit done. Bees don't need motivational speakers. A wolf doesn't need somebody to like G him up and send him to a workshop to get his fucking pump on so that he gets the shit happening in his life. If animals don't perform at their peak, they die. And our human evolution was very similar up until only a few hundred years ago. So the whole problem of peak performance is a feature of modern society. So we exist as motivational speakers, as life coaches, as men's coaches. We exist because we don't have a lion, tiger, saber-tooth tiger chasing on our heels that's going to fucking eat us if we don't stay in peak performance. If we don't stay in peak physical mental health, in our ancestors' evolution, we got chopped. In the modern world, we don't have those consequences anymore. So this guy's talking a couple of 100 years ago about how basically human beings are kind of lazy shitbags who don't get much of their shit done in the majority of cases, right? We're not talking about the men here on this masterclass because you guys are peak performing, high performing men, but we're talking about the majority of people, unhappy, overweight, unfulfilled. It's a problem that's prolific in society. So if we have those superpowers, like if we have the superpowers that are existing already in our evolution, why are we suffering so hard? Like, why is it such an issue for motivation? We have epidemic levels of anxiety, suicide, depression. These things are major problems. We have suicide and lifestyle diseases are leading causes of death. Literally, the highest likelihood that you will die in our modern world is that you take your own life, or that you probably eat and sleep yourself to obesity and early death. It's a pretty unusual situation that a species would take themselves into such decline. And men, I think, are in need of this support most. We generally have a lack of connection, a lack of direction, a lack of focus, and a lack of purpose. So this is the reason why this area of psychology, this area of neuroscience, this area of behavioral psychology has come about, is because we've got these issues, right? So that's the framework. That's the why are we here. Now, how do we actually achieve peak performance? So if we want to talk about the fact that we haven't been achieving our peak performance and we're not getting there on average, we need to talk about what are we doing to get there? What is peak performance? So tonight is going to be centered around this concept, the peak performance concept called flow. This is going to be a deep dive into what is defined as an optimal state of consciousness where we feel our best and perform our best. Now, this was a state that was natural to our ancestors, and that's why we evolved to have this peak performance state that when we study it, we understand there is massive benefit. If you've ever been in a flow state during a sporting game, you'll understand what this means. The physical benefits of being in a peak performance state is you have more endurance, more strength, more muscle, quicker muscle reaction times. We have a decrease in pain and decrease in exertion and exhaustion. Quick show of hands, who here has been in a state where they're so physically amped up that they've been seriously injured, but didn't stop because you were in flow state, or you had this sense of adrenaline and stuff was just, people have told stories. Yep, 100%, almost all hands going up on the Zoom. People have told stories of broken bones and severe and serious injuries by performance athletes who are on the field and have broken their bones and continued to play anyway. That is an example of the physical benefits of a flow state. The second side that we're going to be probably focusing on more tonight is around the mental benefits of achieving a flow state. Increased motivation, productivity, creativity, innovation, learning, memory, empathy. The fucking list is long. And the studies have shown you can achieve 500% increases in almost all of those areas when you optimize yourself to achieve flow states. So it's pretty phenomenally beneficial to have access to this. So what we're going to do tonight is give you practical steps on how to get into flow and what the things are that give you an understanding of what's underneath it. So how do you know you're in flow? You've probably achieved this, and I'm certain that all of us have been in this state at some point or another. So here's how we know we're in flow. You know when you start something and 8 hours later, you don't even realize that you're doing it? You have just been in the zone. My son does this when he plays Lego. Sits down, he opens up the Lego packets, sits there with the books. You can't sit still for a 5-minute conversation, but you get him into a Lego build, and 8 hours later, he's forgotten to eat his lunch. He's forgotten to get up. He barely goes to the toilet. I think we've all experienced this. Here are the 4 indicators that you know that you're in flow. Selflessness. This means your sense of yourself disappears into the task. You just do. You're not thinking anymore about who you are. You're just on a roll. Timelessness. If you've ever been on an incredible motivational workshop or experience like Sharpen the Spear, you get to the end and you're like, man, is it a week or is it a day that I've been here? Because I don't know. And that is another indicator of this flow state. The third thing is effortlessness, meaning you do the thing without thinking and it's just working. If you've had a repetitive task that you've done as part of a work activity and you've just gone all day without even realizing it's gone, effortlessness is a feature. The fourth thing is richness. So you get a vivid experience, you have insights and information in vivid detail. So these are how you know you're in flow. So I want to bring off screen here and I want to jump in and get some contributions so far from what we're saying. What are some of you men experiencing in terms of where have you seen this show up in your life? What are some examples of where you have been in flow and you see yourself having achieved incredible results, or you see yourself having seen some of those things? Dan?
Anytime I'm in creation mode, so for whatever it is, whether it's for work or for when it's been setting up businesses in the past, anytime that I'm actually sitting in creation mode of ideas, days can go by, just days go by, and it just flows in pages and pages and pages and whatever. So anytime I'm in creation mode.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, perfect example. Thank you, Dan. Any other examples, men? Things specifically that you've done where you've realized you've been in flow and the results that you get show that. Adam.
Yeah, for me, one of the ones that comes to mind is if I'm in the gym, sometimes I'll feel like that resistance initially, but once that resistance gets pushed past, I find you can be in the gym for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours without even realizing it. And you kind of, I sometimes have to force myself to leave if I'm in that flow state.
Yeah, love it. It's a great place to get it. It's a great place to experience flow, considering the benefit of that activity. So that's a great combination of beneficial activity and flow, because you can get into flow playing fucking video games. And I know I spent a lot of my 20s and it was 3 in the morning before I realized, and that is a perfect example of flow. Brett, what have you got?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Jason, in the boxing ring, that's an arena for me that's highly reliant on flow, and both physically and mentally in that particular arena.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. So thank you for those examples. Yeah, bang on. So I guess the question, and if we have increases in all of these different elements in our performance, we have decreases in pain, we have increases in our physical performance, mental performance, it sounds like a superpower. And I guess the question kind of is obvious to ask here, like, why would nature load us up with such an epic set of peak performance triggers and tools? It seems kind of crazy that there would be a state that we can get induced into that would use probably so much resources. Well, the answer is that it was necessary for our survival. If we were in a state where we were under threat physically, where what we were doing was critical for our survival, where we were needing our bodies to turn into machines of performance, it was essential to our evolutionary survival for our ancestors to be able to dump all of our neurochemistry that's going to help us to survive. There's also drivers that we're going to explore tonight that are beyond the critical and urgent, and they go more towards exploration and creativity and innovation and cooperation. What does that sound like for you? For me, that sounds like in a tribal environment, we needed to work together, have creative ways to figure out our problems, have creative ways to find resources, and basically to do the things that we needed to do in order to survive. And as I framed up in the early part of the masterclass, we don't experience those conditions as a native state of being anymore. So we need to manufacture the environment in order to induce the flow state that we were born to and evolved to have. So the obvious question is, okay, cool. I get that there's a thing called flow. I get we don't have it as a native state of being. I get that we're supposed to have it because that's how we're evolved. Well, how the fuck do I get it? So great question. That's what we're going to be doing and diving into. So in order to get to an understanding of this, we're going to be going through 3 different models tonight. Here are the 3 models I'm going to be taking you through, and we're going to do a deep dive into each of them. So they don't need to make sense to you now, but I want to give you the visual cue. We're going to start with this idea of motivation, because in order to get anywhere or do anything that's worthwhile, we need to have the requisite, so the required motivation. And that is broken down into 3 distinct areas that are needed in order to achieve and maintain motivation. So that's on the left. The central model here is the 5 key drivers. So inside of the green box here, green circle here on the left is drive. And that drive is broken down into those 5 areas of curiosity, passion, purpose, autonomy, and mastery. In order to continue to drive your motivation, you need to have these 5 elements. And in order for us to understand what is happening underneath all of these, we will need to dive into neuroscience. So we're going to be looking at each of the neurotransmitters in turn, what they are, how they show up, what they look like when they're not working, when they are working, and how to balance that out. Because each of these elements of our motivation are impacted by these key neurotransmitters. So these are the 3 models, and we're going to be diving into first motivation. So, I mean, what is motivation? It kind of sounds a bit academic to ask that, but it's important for us to kind of get an idea of what we're talking about. Motivation is a catch-all term that psychologists use to identify 3 key areas. The first is drive. Drive is what gets us started, and then goals is what keeps us clear about where we're going with that drive, and grit is the thing that keeps us going after we've started. So drive initiates, goals decides where we're going, and grit keeps us going. So you need all 3 of these things in order to achieve success and peak performance in your life. Okay, so this is not something I've made up. This is the work of Duckworth and Lewis, who are the kind of founders and the early godfathers of motivation. And this has been summarized in Stephen Kotler's book, The Art of Impossible. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at each of these: drive, goals, and grit as a part of understanding motivation. And if you guys are taking notes, yeah, absolutely, that's awesome. We will share the slides after the presentation as well. So what is drive? Drive has 2 parts. We have intrinsic drivers and we have extrinsic drivers. And you can see on the screen the key extrinsic drivers that we are driven by in terms of human beings: sex, money, fame. Sounds pretty fucking good to me, doesn't it? Like, yeah, lots of sex, lots of money, lots of fame. The thing about those 3 key drivers, though, and this is what the celebrities and billionaires and people who get to this place where they have lots of those things, they will all tell you the same thing. Great quote from Jim Carrey. I wish everybody could become rich and famous so they could realize it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. This is something you see with celebrity, with people who achieve that status and fame. They get to that place and they feel lost. They feel unmotivated. They feel like, what the heck's it all for? But it is necessary for us as human beings to achieve our extrinsic driven needs first. It was previously believed, right? So our early study in this area believed that extrinsic drivers were more powerful. If you give somebody good pay, If you give someone clear targets and you tell them they have to do something, then that's a good way to get it done. But the thing is about what we've discovered in more recent psychology is that there are 2 levels to this video game. The first level is you build up resources in order to actually survive and be safe and have shelter. When you arrive at a campground, when you're going camping, what's the first thing you do? You put up your tent. You set your food. You get your, you understand your environment. Our early ancestors were driven by these things first. Extrinsic drivers are the first to be present for us. But here's the thing. Once you've achieved that, once you've mastered basic survival, your extrinsic needs, the next level is something that you need to, and it is driven by our own psychology, to go towards your family, your tribe, and your species. There was a study in the US that illustrates this point perfectly. They studied the level of happiness that correlated to income in the US. Up to $75,000 a year, money was correlated to happiness. If I earned 55, I wouldn't be as happy as somebody who earned 65. I wouldn't be as happy as someone who earned 75. And so there was a direct correlation. Once they made 75K a year, guess what happened? It flattened. So the money went up and the happiness stayed the same. So what does that say? It says that once we've established our basic needs, we need something deeper in order to be motivated. We need something intrinsic to motivate us to move forward. So if you have a worker who is paid enough to survive, in order for him to achieve happiness and fulfillment, there needs to be other things at play. He needs to have freedom, autonomy, to be able to pursue things he's interested in. Hands up here who has experienced life where they feel like they're the slave to someone else, like they are under someone else's control, under someone else's mastery. Yes. For those men here who have started their own business or who have gone out on their own to achieve autonomy and freedom, let's bring you off mute and ask your feedback here. How has it differed? When you've been able to achieve autonomy and freedom, what was the difference? Adam.
Yes. So difference in my mental state. Yeah. Honestly, it's been massive, because I was always in that cycle of working for somebody else and somebody dictating when I can go on holidays, when I can, take a break. And for me, one of my biggest values was freedom. And it felt like that was being squandered and squashed. And as soon as I went out, even though I knew there were bigger risks involved, I knew that I would get that freedom back, which I so desired. And I have full flexibility to do and live life on my terms. So in terms of the mental aspect, it's been huge.
Yeah, phenomenal. Thank you for sharing. Great example. And the research demonstrates that. The neuroscience demonstrates that. The behavioral psychology says, if you don't have the opportunity for autonomy, you cannot achieve the full level of fulfillment. There are 3 kinds of happinesses. There is pleasure, where we seek the thing to have us feel good. The second level is engagement, meaning I am receiving a benefit from this and I'm doing things that have me feel good and that actually I'm engaged with and I'm challenged by. That's typically the flow state. And the third level of happiness that's studied is fulfillment. So that is classified as the highest level of happiness, and fulfillment is the thing that we do in contribution to others that is also enjoyable for us. So this is going to be part of the journey tonight, is to explore what is the neuroscience in behind that, why does it make sense, and how do we use it to achieve our own level of fulfillment. So that's drive. Now that we understand that drive has two parts, we understand that there are intrinsic and extrinsic drivers. We are going to be diving into a little bit here of neuroscience to understand the next stages in what we're going to be learning. So the 6 key neurotransmitters that are present for us, there are others, but these are the ones that are in the majority for us: endorphins, dopamine, oxytocin, anandamide, norepinephrine, and serotonin. We're going to look at each of these individually, and we're going to understand why is it important to know about them. What the fuck does it matter to me if I care what anandamide or norepinephrine is? And it will make more sense as we go through. So I'm going to explain the 3 key ones first. Dopamine. You've probably heard of dopamine. You understand that it's the thing that makes you feel good when you get things done. It's a feeling that you get that wants you to pursue something that feels good. So you pursue pleasure, you pursue sex, you pursue excitement. It also is responsible for a fair bit of addiction. Phone notifications, addiction to substances, addiction to sex. Dopamine wants us to want to feel good. And it's what they call the desire chemical. It's the dopamine also is talked about as the molecule of more. I want more. I want to feel good. It's also interesting because it's there for us around curiosity. So we actually want to find out. When a notification goes off on your phone, the thing that your brain is doing is curious about what is the notification. It's actually the reward prediction error. I don't know what it is. And when I find out, I get a hit of dopamine. It's exactly the same as pokies. It's exactly the same as gambling, on horse races, on anything, stock trading, which is basically glorified gambling. It's anything where I don't know what's going to happen next. It's the mystery. So that's not the dopamine system operates on an uncertainty. They did studies on rats, and when they gave them the same treat every time they hit a button, their dopamine levels went down. So even though the food was there and they got their favorite treat, they gave them the same thing. Their uncertainty was what actually created higher dopamine. So then they would randomize it. They had to press the button 5 times, then 3 times, then 7 times, and they were fucking lit up. Their brains went on fire with all the dopamine. It was like, oh, fuck, I don't know if I'm going to get it next. Ooh, I don't know how many times I'm going to press the button. So uncertainty, mystery, and knowing what is going to happen and not knowing what's going to happen next is part of what drives dopamine. The next one we're going to look into is oxytocin. And we're going to unpack each of these in a lot more detail, but I just want to introduce them here. Oxytocin is the love drug. It's what we feel when we're in love. It's what we feel when we eat chocolate. Oxytocin, you get it from feeling close with friends, with partners, with community. You get it's basically the pro-social neurotransmitter. If you sit alone in your room every day and you're working away on fly in, fly out, and you don't see anybody for while you're away, you are going to be low in oxytocin. Most people who live in their single bedroom apartments and they go to work and they come home and they sit and they watch TV, low oxytocin. The next one here is serotonin. It's the one that has us feeling relaxed, feeling calm. It's what you get after an orgasm. It makes you want to sleep. Serotonin is a feeling of well-being. It's a feeling of relaxation. It's the feeling of a job well done and a sense of satisfaction. And we'll understand more about how all this relates here in a moment. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of where these neurotransmitters work in combination with each other and why that's important for us. So the first example I'm going to give you is play. When you have stimulus that engages the desire to do something new, interesting, exciting, novel, you get your dopamine. And if you are doing it in connection with others, you get oxytocin. So this is why it's super important, and you see it in indigenous cultures. every single indigenous culture in history has games. Games to prove their worth, games to interact socially, games for a lot of different reasons. But one of the main reasons is because it feels good, is because we've evolved in order to use play and games to achieve social objectives, like demonstrating ourselves and our prowess to potential mates, and to demonstrate physicality in competition with men, to learn skills and to develop physicality for hunting and for the things that we needed. So what are we dealing with now? Common society, we don't have enough play and competition and games, physical, challenging, rewarding, novel play. Play is a big part of what enables our neurochemistry to work well, to give us access to the peak performance states that we're looking for. So this is an example of where we've got multiple neurochemicals operating in one activity. Once you play in an area that is interesting to you and you start to do it more, you become passionate about this area. This is a preceder to the work we're going to talk about in terms of flow states. When you've gone from passion, sort of from play to passion, it's when you are really lit up about this game. So, Sam, wakeboarding. When you became really good at wakeboarding and you started to kick ass and you started to do it a lot, that started to activate the other neurochemical that's called norepinephrine. Norepinephrine is the thing that's like there when we are fight or flight, or when we are awake and alert. And dopamine is the reward that has us feeling good. So when we know we really enjoy something, we're alert, we're attentive, we enjoy it, and we're starting to get fucking amped about it. So this is something that, again, is a preceder to peak performance. If you're not passionate about what you're doing, you cannot achieve peak performance. You can't get into flow in a powerful way if you don't give a flying fuck about what you're doing. If you're plastering a wall and it's like eating a bag of dicks, there is no chance that you're going to get into a peak performance state. So that's why it's so important to play and then to become passionate about the thing that then later becomes your purpose that you have autonomy and mastery for. So we're going on a journey towards achieving states of peak performance, and we need to bring these first level stages with us in order to get to that last place. So passion, norepinephrine, and dopamine, important. Peak performance states, flow states, guess what? They deploy all neurotransmitters. You get endorphins, which gives you pain relief. You get dopamine because you're doing something that you're desiring to do. You get serotonin, which has you feeling good. Oxytocin, which feels connected to socializing. And norepinephrine, which has you alert and engaged. So this is what we're trying to get to. We want to get to a stage where we are deploying all of our neurochemistry in pursuit of something that we give a fuck about. And we are going to now look at each of them in a bit more detail. So dopamine, we've already talked about the fact that it is what gives you motivation. You get it from learning and from physical pleasure. So when I am learning about a new area of study, when I am getting curious, as we'll talk about later, I get dopamine. When I discover a new idea, I'm like, oh, fuck yeah, dopamine. Shit, that's cool. I didn't know that before. You know, you get that aha moment. That's dopamine. Determination in accomplishing your goals. When you're getting and achieving your goals, you're ticking things off the list. That's dopamine. Here's what it looks like when you don't have enough. Procrastination, low self-esteem, lack of motivation, enthusiasm, low energy. Who feels some of this sometimes? Inability to focus, feeling anxious, feeling hopeless, mood swings. Chances are you're actually deficient in dopamine because it's been depleted or you're not doing things that are going to regularly maintain it or replenish dopamine. Most people are living mostly dopaminergic lives. They're hustling, driving hard, pushing hard, distracted, and then they end up wanting to jack themselves up on coffee and then wind themselves down with alcohol. Who feels like they might kind of have cycles like that sometimes in their life where they go stimulant, depression, stimulant, depression? Yeah, 100%. I've definitely been there. This is the neurochemical that is activated by cocaine. The feeling, if you've ever, had some Charlie, it's, I want more, I want more. And the more and more and more is what creates the addiction. So cool. All right. We know what it is. We know what it looks like when we don't have enough. How do we increase it? And you probably won't give me any awards for telling you the things that you probably already know, but I'm going to tell you anyway, because the good news is you probably already know these things. The bad news is they're not easy. Exercise regularly. Meditate. Do a daily to-do list that includes long-term goals. And each time you tick your activity off, celebrate. Give yourself a little tick and go, fuck yeah. Tick, fuck yeah. That is a dopamine injection into your system. Eat foods, and this is a bit weird, eat foods that are rich in L-tyrosine. Avocados, fish, eggs, cheese, banana, and pumpkin seeds. Apparently, L-tyrosine. You can also supplement L-tyrosine, and you can supplement GABA. GABA is one of the best amino acids that supports stabilizing cortisol and stabilizing your stress chemicals, which allows you to have sustainable levels of dopamine. Regular exercise. Here are some other things: writing, music, arts, crafts, actions and activities which are not achievement orientated, they are creativity orientated. So do things that have no correct answer or no purpose to doing them other than doing them. What that does is it allows your body to replenish the dopamine that is there to drive you to do what you need to do. If you do things for pure enjoyment and pleasure, it rebalances the dopamine. So taking time to recover and doing things that are just purely restorative and purely creative and purely interest-based gives you more dopamine to go and get after the things that you need with dopamine. To get shit done, to be motivated, to go hard, dopamine's needed. You need to rebalance it with something that doesn't need any dopamine. It's kind of counterintuitive. In order to get more dopamine, you need to do the things that don't need dopamine. I guess it kind of makes sense. It's like recharging the battery. All right, so that's dopamine, and each of these neurotransmitters will have a little emoji. I like my little emojis. So the dopamine's like, yeah, get it done. Yeah. He's almost like he's had some, a little bit of something. He's like, yeah, I'm a bit amped. All right, oxytocin, we spoke about this. Pro-social, love, cuddles, cooperation, empathy, feeling like you care and give a fuck about people. Yes. Cuddling, touching, hugging, making eye contact, even shaking somebody's hands gives you oxytocin. And if you're not already into man hugs, I know everybody is here, but people watching on the video, get yourself some fucking man hugs, dudes. Man hugs are great for you. We don't have enough. We don't have enough platonic intimacy in our lives. And that's why we actually are very deficient in oxytocin. What it looks like when you don't have enough. You feel like shit, basically. You're lonely, you're stressed, you lack motivation, you're low energy, you feel disconnected, feel anxious, and also insomnia is another experience of low oxytocin. So I want to ask for some contributions for you here, men. What are some moments that you have had where you felt that physical touch and connection have been absent in your lives, when you felt really isolated, and when you introduce that, what did you notice and what did you notice about yourself? I want to ask for you moments of contrast. For me, I'll give you an example. I used to work fly in, fly out on a 10 and 4 roster. And when I was in the donga, as they used to call it, the accommodation, I would go home and I would use porn, right, to numb out and to escape, because I felt no sense of connection. I didn't have a sense of feeling belonging. And it's very common, and I also experienced this myself. I was actually unfaithful to my wife during the time that I was in fly in, fly out. I was incredibly lonely, incredibly isolated, and started a relationship with someone on site because I was craving that connection and craving the companionship. And when I would come home from the 10 and 4, I was looking for that physical touch and looking for that affection. And my wife at the time doesn't have the same desire. She didn't have the same love language for physical touch and connection. So I would be isolated in both places. And so how that showed up in a way that didn't work for me was I went and sought that affection somewhere else. What I have since learned in my life is that I need to express the fact that I have this need for physical touch and connection. And I need to find it not only from my partner, but also from men. I want to find it in affection, platonic, masculine affection, giving men hugs. So that's something that I experienced in this specific area of oxytocin and that feeling of connection. So you don't have to share to that level of vulnerability, but I'm wondering if there's any men here that would be willing to share around their experience for physical touch, affection, and this thing about wanting and desiring it in your life, maybe when you didn't have it. Yeah, thanks, Adam.
Yeah, so the example that comes to my mind is when I was in school, in high school, I was at an all-boys school, and anything like hugging and that kind of stuff would be frowned upon. You'd be called, gay, or all that kind of stuff. And so I refrained from doing that. And I also, as a result, since I was in an all-boys school, I didn't have any connections to females because they just weren't any around. And therefore, I found that I was lacking that connection and that intimacy. And that's part of the reason why I felt so, as the list here describes, feeling lonely, stressed, low energy, anxious, and all those things. And then once I got out of that all-boys school, I started to connect with more women and start to understand that hugging other men is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Then that's when that oxytocin started to creep back into my life. And all of those feelings of disconnect and loneliness started to disappear.
Yeah, brilliant example. And that leads me to another example for myself. I went to an all boys boarding school as well. And what I found was opportunity to connect with women. So every week there was a ballroom dancing group that was being hosted at school. And I had no interest in ballroom dancing, but I just turned up, and they had busloads of girls every week that would just turn up to this hall. And I didn't know what they were doing. I was like, here's my $5. I don't care what we're doing inside there, but I want to go and hang out with some people. And soon I developed this dependency and this attachment, because that was the only place that I could find connection, and I could find that sense of togetherness. And that later became an unproductive part of my character, that I found and orientated myself to women almost exclusively, because I could express my emotions. I could feel a sense of connection. I could share my feelings, and that would be supported. And in the work that I've done since, I've created connection with men. And so I feel I don't need to go and womanize. I don't need to go and have bevies of women that I want to call and talk to every day and go and hang out with. I have more stable connections and relationships. So if you find yourself feeling like you're experiencing some of those things on that right-hand list, what are the opportunities that you can create in your life to create a genuine social connection with people who are interested in being connected with you, maybe physically or maybe not, because we also get this by being pro-social. So if you're finding yourself feeling low energy and a lack of motivation, you may actually be needing and not getting enough oxytocin. So some practical strategies for things you can do to enhance oxytocin: physical touch, hugging and cuddling, even just as friends, platonically, making eye contact. It's really interesting. There's an interesting study that says that when you look into someone's eyes, you actually have a dilation of your pupil. Your pupil gets wider if you feel connected to that person. It's one of the non-verbal ways you can tell if someone's into you. If you're single and you see a woman and their pupils dilate, they get wider. It means that they feel connected to you. Socializing with friends reduces cortisol and also stimulates your vagus nerve. So spending more time with friends and family. Pets, touching pets, getting a massage. This is cool. So even though you don't necessarily have a connection with that person, the physical act of touching someone else's body, having someone touch your body, actually stimulates oxytocin. Acupuncture is another great way. Listening to calm, slow tempo music helps oxytocin. And surprise, surprise, exercise and meditation. You'll basically see this as a prescription across all of these neurotransmitters. So if you're not already exercising and meditating, guys, I'm going to be banging on about this for basically all of these ones. The other one that stimulates oxytocin, which is interesting, is cold showers. It actually stimulates your vagus nerve and rebalances oxytocin. So that's our love drug. Again, the little emoji here of the love eyes. Serotonin. So this is a feeling that you get after a good meal, after sex. You feel calm, you feel peaceful, a feeling of a job well done. If you've done a good job in the bedroom, you get that twice. Feeling job well done, and I'm feeling sleepy. How do you see, or how do you know that you might be low in serotonin? If you feel low self-esteem, if you feel overly sensitive and emotional, if people's comments trigger you, if you have anxiety and panic attacks, if you have mood swings, depression, feeling hopelessness, social phobia. So if you're anxious about being with other people or being around other people, you may have a low serotonin. Obsessive compulsive. So if you stress and pick at things and you want to try and control things a lot and things need to be really particular and you really fucking get anxious and worked up about it, you may actually have low serotonin. So some strategies to enhance this well-being chemical: again, exercise, cold showers, meditation. Here's a good one: 10 to 15 minutes of sunshine every day. Surprise, surprise, we are kind of like plants. You kind of need to give us sunshine and fresh air in order for us to, surprise, surprise, feel good, because we're designed to be outdoors. Most of us spend a fuck ton of time under these things, right? Under fluorescent lights. And again, is getting a massage, which increases serotonin and decreases cortisol. So I know we're banging on a fair bit here about these neurochemicals, and I know we're going into a fair bit of detail, and why it's important will become apparent here in a minute. And the final one, actually, we're going to do two more. Endorphins. This is the thing that has us not feeling pain when we get punched in the face. So Brett, you'd know about this one. You know, your nose is broken, you lost a tooth, but you don't feel any of the pain until the next day. That's endorphins. And thank fuck we have them, because when we have impact and injury, it's the thing that has us feeling not so bad. Like, you know, when you kick your toe and you don't feel the pain for a little while, or even if you have and you've broken something and you don't feel it until later, that's endorphins. It gives you a euphoric sense of being relaxed, and it's the buzz we get after we go for a run. The runner's high, that's endorphins. Exercise is endorphins. How do we know we have it? Similar themes here: anxious, depressed, mood swings, aches and pains. So if your body is routinely in pain, it may be because you actually have low endorphins. Insomnia, you're not sleeping well, and impulsive behavior. So how do we increase endorphins? You can probably tell from the emoji. Watching comedy, laughing, and crying. If you allow yourself to have an emotional release, you're actually producing endorphins. Creating art or music, eating dark chocolate, or spicy foods. I don't know if you guys are a fan of spicy foods, but when I have chili that fucking rocks my socks off, I actually feel really alive. I'm like, fuck, I'm almost gonna die, and I didn't die, and I feel like, oh fuck, there's a buzz, there's an elevation that you get. Again, exercise, meditation, and high intensity interval training. Specifically, if you bust yourself quickly, go hard, and then stop, you're going to get more endorphins than if you go for a long walk. All right, so another neurochemical that we get during peak states, that is norepinephrine. This is the thing, and you can see the emoji is like, gives you a clue to what this is about. This is your fight or flight. This is your attentiveness. This is your attention. Like, fuck, I'm aware, I'm alert. You know, when you feel you get a shock and all of a sudden you can hear everything and you can see everything really clearly, that's norepinephrine. That's making you turn, like you're alert and your senses are turned on. Anxiety, depression, addiction, and substance abuse is some of the things that we experience when we have low norepinephrine or when we're out of balance. When we have too much norepinephrine, we get anxiety and we get insomnia. We're too buzzed. Coffee and other substances can have us and we can feel anxious and like, fuck, you know, I'm worried about the future. If we don't have enough norepinephrine, depression, lethargy, fatigue, lack of focus. So how do we achieve a balance? No prizes in guessing. Exercise, meditation, sleep, sense of feeling accomplished, actually. So it has a relationship to dopamine, and music has us rebalance that sense of calm. Okay, beautiful. So we've done the deep dive into the neurotransmitters. We've had a look at what they mean, and now they're going to interact with the various stages. The reason why we've done that is it's going to be relevant for you to understand the 5 most powerful intrinsic drivers. So you remember, and I'll take you back to this slide so you guys can get a refresh on this. Remember this one. What is drive, right? What is motivation? It includes drive. Drive is intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. We are going to do a deep dive now into what we know as intrinsic motivation, the thing that occurs after you've got all your survival needs in place, the thing that's going to be needed to achieve peak states and to get to where you want to go in life. 5 stages, and each of them have neurotransmitters that are necessary for them. The first, in order to achieve flow and peak performance, you need to start with curiosity. The caveman needed to be curious about how to find the next source of food, how to understand how to make his tools, what this thing tastes like, and is it edible? Is there food on the other side of that hill? If you don't have curiosity, you don't survive as a caveman. If you don't have curiosity, you don't survive. So what's the problem with the modern world? If we don't have curiosity, if we don't actually have spaces where we're learning about new things, we're not activating what we were supposed to have. So curiosity, what happens neurochemically with curiosity? It starts with dopamine and norepinephrine. When you get curious about a thing, your brain rewards you. When you get that light up moment, when you've discovered something interesting, you get norepinephrine, that alertness. So when you're reading a book and you've discovered a new idea and you've discovered something interesting, you know, when you get told that random piece of trivia and you're like, whoa, that's fucking cool. I didn't know that. That's dopamine and norepinephrine. And the path to peak performance starts with getting curious. So here's the formula for how to enhance it is look for things that you're curious about and you want to learn more about, read books about them, listen to podcasts about them. And here's the key, study the intersection points between the things you're curious about, because the brain will make connections. So if you have things you want to learn about, create a list. of things that you'd like to understand more. Write a list of 10 things that you know what? I have no idea about cryptocurrency trading. I have absolutely no idea about it. Read an article, listen to a podcast. Your brain will be supported in establishing connections it didn't have before. And that's necessary in order to achieve the flow and the peak performance states that we're looking for. If you're exploring in your purpose and you want to find the next thing that you want to achieve in life, start by making a list of all the things you're curious about and start exploring the intersection points between them. I got really curious about evolutionary biology. I got really curious about anthropology and indigenous communities and indigenous culture. I got really curious about psychology and how to motivate people. And then I got really curious about how to create healing and transformation. Guess what? I put those things together after I started getting curious about those things. They became a passion. They evolved into my purpose. And once I created autonomy, I'm now pursuing mastery in this area in my life. Putting all of those 4 or 5 things together, I've become obsessed with this area in my life. I've become fucking fixated on it. I spend all of my spare time when I'm doing the dishes, I'm listening to podcasts to understand human behavior. I'm listening to podcasts to understand how to motivate people. I've become obsessed with this area. I have 100 titles of books in my Audible because I'm just this curiosity has become a beast. So harness curiosity. If you want to get to a place of peak performance, harness curiosity. Right. Next, once you've established curiosity and you've started to learn about these new areas that you want to discover and get curious about, you get passionate about it. And you can see the little plus symbols under dopamine and norepinephrine. That means you get more of those two. You get lit up about the thing that you're curious. Adam, when you started studying Norse mythology, tell me about your journey from curiosity to passion to purpose.
Yeah, so I guess the curiosity goes way back to when I was a child, just seeing those heroic tales. And that really resonated with me, that really primal aspect of it. And then over time, I just had a bit more exposure. And then eventually I was like, oh, I want to start reading books. Then I started listening to podcasts, reading more books, studying it online with intention. And over time, that turned into a passion where I was like, damn, there's so much that can be applied to to a person's life by studying this stuff. And yeah, that's basically the journey from start to finish.
Yeah. And do you want to put a book down when you're learning about it?
Not really. I have to force myself to put it down.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Sam, when you started first getting into water sports, talk about that journey where you went from like, I'll just test it out, I'll just start it. And then how did it become a passion?
I think I guess I can relate the curiosity to whether or not I could do this trick, maybe. Like,
yes,
that's when I had the most drive, was wanting to be able to get this trick done or get this trick consistent. And I think that was maybe some curiosity there, whether I could achieve it. Or curiosity in the competition, how do I stack up against others, maybe?
Mm. And what I can see there for you, Sam, is that you've actually traversed the full stack. You went from curiosity probably when you started. You got passionate about it when it started to become like a thing that you did every weekend, and you got your boat and you started to compete. You started to do it all the time. And then it became something that really drove you. You actually became purposeful about it, and you were competitive at a high level, right?
Yeah.
And then you said that you stopped doing it with other people. You actually started doing it on your own. That was autonomy. You started to actually just become like obsessive about it. And then when you talk about learning new tricks, that's mastery. That's like, I've achieved the basics.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I've achieved the basics. Now I'm going to fucking master this thing. I want to do the next hardest one. You have achieved, and you were achieving, flow states and peak performance. And that's how you got to being competitive at a national level in wakeboarding.
I can see how that mastery comes at the end.
Yeah, exactly. Dan, what can you see in your life that you followed this process? You followed this curiosity, passion, purpose journey?
It's quite funny, actually. It's evolving just in the last probably 6 or 8 weeks, funnily enough.
Yeah.
My passion for outdoors, getting up on the tops of peaks and things like that. Curiosity was, as a young fella, got out there, became a passion, it became a purpose. More recently, I get out on my own and go and climb mountains. But in the last probably, like I say, a couple of months, I've started looking into reading more biographies about the 8,000 meter peaks, you know, the Everest and the you know, those ones through the Himalayas. And more just out of interest again and going back to the curiosity. But the more I'm reading into them, I'm going through this journey at the moment going, fuck, what if? What if? You know? What if I just kind of set that as a target and go and fucking do it? And so it's now starting to evolve yet again.
Yes.
It's quite exciting at the moment.
Yes. And you've got dopamine and norepinephrine going, ooh, fuck yes, this is interesting. I'm curious about these people. I'm actually lit up by my inquiry into this area, right? Yeah, brilliant. Brett, do you have an example in your life for where you can see that this journey you've taken?
Yeah, boxing. It started being curious about famous boxers like Muhammad Ali, and then I had the opportunity to join a boxing gym myself. The more I did it, the better I wanted to get at it. It became my purpose then. And now, having competed in boxing bouts and started my journey as a boxing coach, started to head down that autonomy and mastery road as well with that.
Yeah, brilliant. And the road to mastery is the road of actually teaching others. And so there you've had your journey in that field towards peak performance. And when you're in the boxing ring, I can guarantee you have a sense of timelessness, goes quick. You have a sense of selflessness, richness. You're experiencing a flow state when you're getting punched in the face, which is kind of fucked up, but it's awesome. And good, thank fuck for the endorphins that have you not feeling that broken nose until the next day.
That's it.
Yeah, beautiful. What about you, Brendan? What have you seen in your life that you might have followed this journey?
It's more of a new thing, I guess. Like, I've been fucking muddling around a lot, you know. But like, I've really probably like Dan over the last probably 8 weeks, have really been curious about where I'm going, what I'm wanting to do, and getting into understanding people more, understanding what makes people tick, and it's that's the purpose. And I'm being more inquisitive and researching a shitload more, and that's becoming the passion. I haven't quite got to that autonomy, and definitely not to the mastery. So it's very new, but it's certainly putting me on the right track to where I'm going.
Yeah, amazing. So the men that have gone through the path, which are here on the call tonight, are talking about their journey to discover and to create purpose through something that they're curious and passionate about. So that early stage journey, men, that's where you are now. Where you'll get to is this really funky place of purpose. So once you've explored and discovered something you're passionate about and you're connected with something greater than yourself, this is the key. When you're on your own with your passions, you have dopamine and norepinephrine. You're lit up by the ideas and by the exploration. When you involve others, you get oxytocin online. That means you're now supercharging your state. You're supercharging your motivation. You're supercharging your performance because you are doing it with others and for others. This increases your performance with more focus, more productivity, more resilience, and you have an intrinsic fire that's starting to burn because you're in service and contribution to others. And Adam, you already experienced this, I'm sure, in the work that you do. You feel like, bring off mute for a second. When you are running your events, do you feel like you're at work?
That's another example when I get into the biggest flow states is when I'm doing an event, I just kind of look down at the time and it just flies by. And honestly, if I didn't have a finishing time, it would probably go until midnight, to be honest.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. It feels amazing.
It does. And neurobiologically, purpose alters your brain. It actually decreases the activity in the amygdala, which relates to fight or flight responses and stress. And people with purpose, this is wild, have lower instances of stroke, dementia, cardiovascular disease. As we shift our attention from serving ourselves to serving others, people with purposeful lives actually live longer and they have much better health outcomes. The other thing about purpose, and the reason why we're promoting it as a peak performance tool, is it guards against obsessive self-rumination. If you are thinking about someone else and you're in contribution to others, you're not obsessed about yourself and what's fucked up and what's wrong and how shit you're feeling. You're there, and when I'm chopping wood and filling lanterns and getting ready for a men's circle, I'm fucking neck deep in shit, from having to do all that. I'm like sweating balls, and I'm like there on my Saturday and I'm giving up my time. I don't give a shit. I don't care at all when I'm trekking through the bush and it's a hard, long slog. I don't care about the fact that it's tough and hard and physically challenging because I'm in service and contribution to others. So if you are feeling the sense of stress and anxiety, if you want to reduce those things, find ways to be in contribution to others using the things that you're passionate and curious about. So this is like a neurological and a neurobiological explanation for why purpose is a peak performance state, right? And some of us already have a good sense of the fact that it's good, but this is the why it's good. So what happens when you get to purpose and you want to go out and do these things? This is where it starts to get a bit challenging. This is when it gets a bit sticky. You've discovered a purpose, but your system, your neurochemistry demands that you have freedom and autonomy to pursue your purpose. The human is not designed to be in a cage when they discover something outside that they want to pursue. We are far more likely to be motivated to do something that we are curious about, are passionate about, and are purposeful about than whether we're forced to do this. Autonomy to pursue your purpose gives you more focus, gives you more positivity, gives you more resilience, more creativity, better overall health. Basically, it turns out humans, surprise, surprise, we're free range animals. We want to be free range. We don't want to be tied down, which is why we have people in their corporate coffins feeling fucked up about the fact that they're stuck at their desk because they don't have the sense of autonomy. So once again, some of us here have that clarity that they already know they've achieved that autonomy and they're pursuing it. This is why it's good. If you don't have it, this is probably why you're not feeling great. So if you want to achieve peak performance, you need to give yourself the freedom and space to pursue your passion and your purpose. And the final stage is mastery. This is where it all kind of compounds. So your system requires space for you to pursue mastery in your skill. So dopamine rewards dopamine. When you get better at the trick, Sam, you then discover the next trick that you want to learn. And once you've mastered that trick, the next trick you want to learn, okay? It produces dopamine consistently. Drive is the fuel, is the psychological fuel that pushes us to obtain resources. We have the greatest chance of obtaining those resources if we have a plan for chasing them, right? So once we've achieved all of this, once we've gotten to a place where we've gotten curious, we've gotten passion, gotten purposeful, we've got autonomy to pursue it, And then we've got mastery, like, fuck yeah, we're pursuing mastery now. We need to have a sense of where we're going to take this new amped up version of yourself. You're all charged up. You're all fucking ready to go. It's like, where now? This is the fuel. Now we need the where we're going to go. So the next dive we're going to do is to the goals. So coming back to the model, what we've just dived into is drive. We have looked at intrinsic motivation in the form of curiosity, passion, purpose, autonomy, and mastery. That's what drives us. We now need to know where we're going to take that drive. So goals. What is goals? Why do we need them? There's a really interesting study that based on pure nothing at all in terms of changing performance, just purely having a goal will increase your performance by 25%. They studied lumberjacks in Canada, and one group had no targets, and they just send them off and they go and chop wood. And the other group, they said, you want to do 40 trees a day. They were 25% more effective by just purely having goals. So you have been, if you follow this process and you follow this formula, you're amped up and charged up, and you've got your peak performance state that you're pursuing. Now you need to know what you're going to do with it. Okay. So your brain is a prediction engine and a threat assessor. It will filter external information based on whether it will get you killed or whether it's aligned with your goals. Basically, what we're saying there is, if you don't have a goal that says where you're going and what it is you're specifically wanting to achieve, your body, your neurochemistry will actually destroy itself. You will get fucked up about the fact that you are pursuing something with no purpose, with no agenda. So goals are a peak performance tool that takes the fire and decides where to put it. The next level of goals that you need to have in order to achieve the peak performance states we're talking about is a massively transformational purpose. According to Stephen Kotler, that's his framing, what I would call a mission. It is the largest increase in motivation and productivity come from goals that are large scale. If you just have a goal that says, I want to buy this car by this time, you've probably experienced this in your life before. It doesn't feel that good when you get it. You're like, fuck, well, I've worked all this time and I bought this thing and now I don't feel great about it. And that's why people have addictions to shopping, is because they want to buy a thing and then it doesn't necessarily light them up. So an example of a massively transformational purpose, discover a sustainable way to end world hunger. That's a fucking massively transformational purpose. It will be a filter that will weed out what doesn't matter. So you've got all this charge, you've got all this motivation, you've got this drive. It's like, okay, cool, I have a goal, but I need to know what is important, what is not important, and what is important. So that's the next stage in understanding how goals are needed as part of the 3 parts of motivation. Massively transformational purpose. You need a big goal, because if you achieve it and it's too short, you don't have that drive, it's gone. You need that goal to be long-term. The step down from a massively transformational purpose is your high, hard goal. So as a example, we said we want to have a sustainable way to end world hunger. That was the massively transformational purpose. The next level down is a degree in nutrition, studying alternative food sources, right? It's an interim step on the way to achieving your massively transformational purpose or your mission. The benefit is it gives you attention and focus. It is required for peak performance. You need to know the thing that you're doing on the way to achieving your massively transformational purpose. Otherwise, you'll burn out on the way to the big one, because you won't know whether or not you're achieving the success on the way there. Right? So this is, again, part of the goals element of motivation. They also need to be aligned with your values. There is no sense in saying I want to earn $1 million a year if you have a desire to have peace, love, and mung beans and live in a hippie commune and exist in a state of bliss and relaxation. If you are choosing a massively transformational purpose and a high, hard goal that matches your values, then it is much more likely to be sustainable. Right? So again, this is all underneath a banner of motivation. Now we break it down even further. daily sub steps on the way to your high, hard goals. As an example, 500 words a day towards writing your book. And the stack of goals looks like this: massively transformational purpose, high, hard goals, clear goals, or mission, goals, habits. And for those who've done the path, that's going to start to resonate. And for those who don't know what that means, follow along here and you can dive into this deeper with Stephen Kotler's Art of Impossible if you want to find out more. But a well-crafted daily to-do list that is going towards your high, hard goal and towards your massively transformational purpose will allow your peak performance state that you've created to be funneled into something that will be productive and will achieve what you're looking for. Okay, so those are the sub-elements underneath goals inside of motivation. So we're going to come back to the model. We've done drive, right? That was our 5-step process. That's what's going to have you driven intrinsically to go after what you want and to achieve peak performance. We've talked about goals and how to make sure that the goals are aligned and that you've got short, medium, and long-term goals. Again, key for peak performance. The final piece is grit. So once you've gotten started on your purpose and you're moving towards mastery, you need an understanding of where you're going, and that was goals. The final piece is grit. Motivation launches you down the path. Proper goals help define that path. Grit keeps you going. Here are some strategies in order to, well, actually what I'm going to do here, I'm going to bring that off and I'm going to ask for some feedback on the work that we've just done in goals. What are some reflections that you have, men, around a massively transformational purpose, your high, hard goals, and your clear goals? What are some of the things that you've experienced in your life where you've used those and how you've experienced whether or not you achieved them or didn't achieve them and how they made you feel? Adam.
Okay. Yeah, so the example I'll give is me just starting up my business. So my biggest goal was to just start up my own business and to be my own boss and to give value to people through my business. And my goals have changed a little bit since then because there's next steps. But at that point in time, my goal was to have that. And the steps, the incremental steps I decided to take was, okay, start creating content, start, booking calls to coach people, start doing my events. And all of these small baby steps eventually were compounded and they led to my ultimate goal at the time, which is to create my own business. And that also starts with habits like reading every day and meditating. And all of those little things compounded into that goal. It's kind of like a pyramid, I guess you would call it, with like the little goals make up the bulk at the bottom, which then leads to the interim goal and then to the main one.
So question, what is your massively transformational purpose?
My massively transformational purpose is I've had a vision of me being one of the leading, I guess you could say, ice bath and cold exposure therapists in Australia, where people can come to my events and have massively transformational experiences and leave better than when they arrived. And I want to be known in Australia as one of those guys.
Yeah, that is amazing. If we think about the example and we think about the scale of the massively transformational purpose, we'll go back to the slide, talking about ending world hunger through sustainable ways. How massive is your massively transformational purpose? And do you think you could have scale to actually specify it a little more?
Scale to specify a little bit more? Yeah.
So if you that's fantastic, right? So you've got a mission to become one of Australia's leading cold therapists. What does that achieve And what clarity could you give to the impact that that's going to have?
Yeah, so what it will achieve is it allows more people to tap into their body, to tap into their nervous system, to increase all the like dopamine, serotonin levels, because as you mentioned, cold showers, cold exposure increases pretty much all of those.
Yeah.
So allowing people to really experience what it is like to have their body in a peak state. And by doing that, with more people having by having more people in the peak state, more people are able to pursue their purpose, are able to get themselves out of mental ruts, and just to create an overall healthier society of individuals.
Yes, 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 yes. That's fantastic. And what do you notice about your daily activities and your daily habits now that you're operating inside of that massively transformational purpose compared to when you didn't have it?
As in when I didn't have the vision?
Yeah, when you didn't have that vision, what were your daily practices and rituals like? What was the consistency? What was it like before and after having a big vision?
Yeah, well, it was kind of like before a vision that I was like a leaf in the wind. I was just kind of moving because I didn't have a clear focus. And if we don't have anything to focus on, a vision, a goal to strive towards, then our actions are going to resemble that. So our actions are going to be all over the place. Whereas if we just have like that razor sharp focus on this one goal, our actions will start to fall into place. And that's what happened to me, I find, is that, yeah, I just was like, okay, this is what I need to do. This is the next step I need to take. And every time I'll feel myself slacking off, I'll just remember, what is my goal? What is my vision? And it brings you back onto your purpose. Well, for me personally.
Yeah, powerful. That is phenomenal. So yeah, great example. And I think myself in my own life, I experienced the same thing. Before I had a purpose, before I had my massively transformational purpose, my daily habits were only in contribution to what my immediate need was. Go to work so I don't get my boss, pissed off, earn a paycheck so I can pay for my bills. It was a very short-term, immediate, and my purpose was family and career. And when that was taken away, or when that ended in the way that it did, I was like, fuck, I got nothing left. So from a neurochemical perspective, having a purpose, having something that's bigger than ourselves, allows us to deploy all of this neurochemistry to have us feeling happier, healthier, and more fulfilled. We'll live longer lives. We will achieve better outcomes. We will achieve peak performance states more consistently if we have those things in place. So for the men who've done the path, this is the neuroscience that supports the journey that we've been on to find and discover purpose. This is effectively the backup science. This is like the document in behind, like with all the references. This is the why behind the path effectively. So once you've got the drive, you've got the goals, we need to talk about this thing called grit, because it's all well and good to say where we're going and to feel lit up about it, but we've got to continue on that path, because it's the grit that keeps us going. So we're going to have a brief exploration of grit here, and then we're going to close out, because we are already at an hour and a half. If you guys would believe that, we are 90 minutes. We're almost 90 minutes in. So grit, motivation launches you down the path. Proper goals helps to find that path. Grit keeps you going. Completing daily difficult tasks rewards you with dopamine. So grit, supported by neuroscience, is the daily actions that you probably don't want to do because they suck. Getting into a nice bath for 5 minutes, it sucks. Doing the physical activity and the exercise, it's not easy to do. So accustoming yourself to hardship is a peak performance supercharger, because it's going to be the thing that builds the muscle of sustained activity and persistence towards your hard goals, towards your massively transformational purpose. And the way to do this is to habituate. So this is habits. some of the strategies to maintain grit that the research supports. Gratitude. The men of the path will be familiar with that practice that they did every day. Positive self-talk, affirmations, things that will support and reinforce your self-belief that the things you're doing are worthy and you need to continue doing them. So the formula for grit: do hard things often to build the muscle that will allow you to persevere and to persist in pursuit of your purpose and your goals. So that is grit, the final element in our little trifecta. And here's the brief recap. We've talked about what motivation is. We talked about what intrinsic drivers we need to deploy in order to achieve peak performance: curiosity, passion, purpose, autonomy, and mastery. Once we've driven, we need to know where we're going with goals, and we need to continue going there with strategies to support grit. And we did the deep dive into our neurochemistry that supported this process, that enables this process, that is activating and also driving what it is that we're trying to achieve. So those are the three key areas that are going to help you double your productivity, your creativity, and if you achieve flow states, have 500% increases in motivation, creativity, resilience, the things that we talked about earlier. You will achieve these things using the science, using the magic of these neurochemicals. So I want to now, we are at time, but I want to just close here with a Q&A and some reflection. So I'd love to open the floor here for what were the key things that you learned from this that you didn't know before? Things that were like, wow, okay, that's really interesting. Whenever you've got something to share, just put your hand up and let me know. Adam.
Yeah, so for me, it was definitely the which endorphins, oh, sorry, not endorphins, but the, what are all the called, the 6 of them together?
Neurochemicals.
Neurochemicals. I had no idea which neurochemicals were related to each area, which I found to be really interesting because I know about them individually, but I didn't know which ones fire off for certain aspects like drive, goals, and grit.
Brilliant.
That's
awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah, very cool. Other men, what did you see that you're taking away? Sam.
Yeah, just have the intrinsic drivers, how purposeful they are, or how powerful they are, I guess, and how much you should be aware of the intrinsic drivers.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
To give you that.
Interesting. Or to give you the passion, yeah.
Yes.
And the drive.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Remembering that the curiosity, passion, purpose, autonomy, mastery sits inside of drive, right? Yeah. So that's the green circle that you can see on the screen. That's what's inside of what drives us. So, yep, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing, Sam. Dan, what was your key takeaways here?
Yeah, it's kind of the obvious. It covered the undercurrent of everything you put there is get off your ass and actually do something, if I can say it like that. And even just as much as getting up in the morning and actually, I've got lazy and I sit in my little box here working all day, and all of those things that you talk about, the lack of motivation, that just everything flat, you know, is so apparent. It's not funny until I actually go and work towards, you know, the goals that I'm setting myself. Then it lights up momentarily, just to crash again once I go back to my daily routine. So yeah, absolutely, get up off my ass in the mornings and actually just get out there, go for the walk, go for the run, come back, have the cold shower, get energized into the day, at least start the day right.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. Brendan, what are you taking away from this, man?
I'm taking away that the hardship is what is needed to allow myself to have the autonomy. I've got the passion. but I've got to allow myself the grit, or put in the grit to give myself the sense of autonomy that I'm craving.
You've got to do the work to get to the place where your autonomy is going to be, supporting for you.
Yeah, so that's the path I'm on at the moment. So I can see where it's going, and this has definitely helped understanding that you've got to have that hardship by doing those things, which is going to ultimately give you the autonomy that you want to enable you to have the mastery of where you're going.
100%. Great realization. Brett, what was your key takeaway?
Yeah, the multifaceted nature of drive, and just how many different elements come together to create that in our lives, and how important it is to not narrow the focus onto any one of those factors, but look at it as a whole, to then, drive the car, power the engine, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, amazing. So, as I mentioned a few times here, this work comes from Stephen Kotler's book, The Art of Impossible. It is a fantastic read. It is mind-blowing. I've only covered probably about a third of his book in this masterclass, and the content from this is almost exclusively taken from Stephen Kotler's work. So if you're looking for the backup and the research behind it, and you want to understand the basis and want to dig into the science, it's very well researched and referenced. It's it really did shift. It changed the game for me in my work of helping men to find purpose, because understanding the neuroscience behind why we feel so good when we have a purpose, why we feel so good when we're pursuing something that we're passionate about, and what actually motivates us. Yeah, that was for me the big aha in this, is how key the neurochemicals and the neurotransmitters are to lighting me up. And once I understood why I felt like lit up, it motivated me more to continue to do the things that would light me up. And this is a great reminder. I don't have a current regular practice of a cold immersion. I do cold showers, but Queensland's not very fucking cold in the shower. So this is a great reminder for myself as well to get back into the ice. So, man, I want to thank you for joining me here tonight. Thank you for allowing me to take you through these models that I've learned and the things that I've discovered, and to continue to live my purpose. This is what I do. This is what I love. And you've all allowed me and supported me in doing this tonight. So for those of us who are watching on the recording, thank you for joining us. And thank you if you've stayed this far. I acknowledge you and applaud you for your commitment to your own learning. And if you'd like to find out more about what we do in the path of how we help men to find that purpose, send me a DM. I can share with you about the program and support you in how to find that for yourself, and how to get you lit the fuck up about your life, because it's the only way to live, I promise. All right, man, this is it's been great to have you all. Thank you so much, and appreciate you. For those men in the path continues, we'll see you on the 1st of November, which is our next group coaching and accountability call. And for those who are outside, we run this masterclass every 6 weeks. There'll be a new topic. There'll be a new area to discover, a new author, a new book, a new deep dive into a new topic to help you kick ass in life. So stay tuned and join us again.